Welcome everybody to Chatting with the Comic Community. That's right, guys, it's back. It's back for a limited time, and we're going to get to episode 100. That's right, guys, 100. We'll get 99 and a half in there somewhere because we got Darth Lopez coming on, but we're going to episode 100 with Bobby Delgado being the 100th episode. We're starting off with the first episode, with the last episode, because he was the first guest. But today, I have a very, very special guest because this guy has been collecting for so long, and I'm super excited to get to know how he got started collecting, what he collects, and everything else nerdy about him. So without further ado, let's bring out my next guest. Let's bring out Steppo.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome, Steppo. Thank you so much for joining me. Like I've said to previous guests, that we've had this plan for over a year now, so I'm thankful that you took the time out of your busy day to sit down and talk with me and get to know you a little bit more.
No worries at all.
No worries at all. So for the viewers at home that don't know a lot about you, give them a little rundown of who you are.
Well, I started collecting in 1960 and when I was 6 going on 7. I was 7. And so I had also gotten a little bit in 59, but I remember more vividly from 1960 because we had moved into a different house. And all the kids in my neighborhood collected adventure comics, which I was unaware of. And then I fell in love with them. And that was my first love in comics. I love the Legion. I love DC. And everything just sort of went from there. And I've been collecting ever since.
Right on. So you kind of got into a little bit about how you got started, but I want to go into more detail of how you got into comic collecting / reading.
What happened was this, that when my family, we would go to church, and I was in the choir with my brother and my sister. And then after church, our family ran hotels, and we had a restaurant and bars in both hotels. We had two. And so what happened was we would go down for breakfast at the Imperial. That was where my dad was working. My grandfather was working at the Mallory Hotel. We sold the Imperial in '01. We sold the Mallory in 2003. But what we would do is the place was always jumping. We had a very good breakfast trade, and Dad let us go to the newsstand right there with the cashier stand for the restaurant and let us pick out a comic book to read while we were waiting for our food to arrive. And so that was one of the ones where I started. That's where I got my Amazing Spider-Man #1, Journey to Mystery '83, and various and assorted. And the very, very first book that I can remember that I had is this one here. This is the first book I can remember, and this is from November of 1960. It seems appropriate, 1960. So this probably was in September of 1960. I had just turned 7. But I got this at the Imperial, and the restaurant was called the King's Coffee House. And and the King's Coffee House, my father collected comics as a kid. He liked the Little King, and he wanted to use the Little King because the Imperial Hotel, King's Coffee House, the Queen's Rooms, that whole regal theme that we did. Grandpa bought the Imperial in 1950. He bought the Mallory in 1943. So, but the long and the short of it was, Dad contacted United Features. Grandpa said, "What are we going to have for our logo for the restaurant?" And Dad said, "I like the Little King. Let's do this." So he called United Features, and he said, I love the Little King. I loved him as a kid. We'd like to use him as our mascot for the hotel, for our restaurant. They said, "We'd be more than happy to do it for you." He said, "Okay, fair enough. What do I have to do? What does it cost?" They said, "It'll cost you $100,000. And my father went, "What?" And that was the end of that. So what Dad did was he contacted a fancy design architect down in California, and had him design. He sort of mocked up, it's the Little King, but it's not the Little King. And that's what we use for our advertising. But my father started, and I had some of the remnants of his comic collection. Um, I've talked about it before, but those books, which were very special, they were different from the Silver Age, which is where I started with the code books. I grew up in the Silver Age with code, and so the hooks were set very securely. I assure you, they're still set securely, and but that's basically how it happened.
So, did you ever stop at any time and stop collecting, or were you straight through your entire life?
I was pretty much straight through. I would have small gaps where I would hold off for a little while. In other words, if I thought the thing I would do is when I have a pull box and I would get a lot of stuff, and then on my nightstand I would read them at night when it was quiet and calm, and I was able to and what I would do is I would then have these stacked up, the ones I wanted to read first, the ones I wanted to read last. And what I found was the ones that I wasn't reading, I'd have like 4 or 5 months worth of these books, and they'd be stacking up and stacking up. And I realized I wasn't reading them and I wasn't enjoying them. So I basically, in 1988, for the most part, I stopped buying new books and started buying old books. And I traded away my comic collection from 1965 all the way up to 1988. I traded my entire completest Silver Age collection away. I had a huge 77, 78 boxes, everything up to 1988 from 1965, and all the new books I had bought, everything went, except for World's Finest. And so what I did was I concentrated on Golden Age material, and about that time, I'm a student of history, and I enjoy the history of the United States, and I also enjoy the history of comics and any other manner of other things. The history of these things adds color to the cheeks, so you understand the times in which they came from, like World War II or post World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, all these other things, these different events, and all the unrest in the 70s and what that there was and stuff like that. But what happened was this. I became interested in the Sandman because I bought a copy of New York World's Fair Comics of 1939. And the fella that I bought it from said there's been conjecture that this is the first appearance of the Sandman, and that Adventure Comics 40, which was heretofore thought to be the first appearance of the Sandman, that Fair 39 was first. And what I did then was I became interested, and of course there was no internet, there was no any of this junk. Everything was done by mail or by phone, cashier's check for things to be checked. And I've gone over the whole story before, but the long and the short of it was I proved that the Sandman's first appearance was in Fair 39. And once that was done, then Overstreet, at that time in about 1995, I did the research on the Sandman probably in the early 90s. In 95, I was invited to become an advisor to the Comic Book Price Guide. And that's when Steve Geppi purchased the Overstreet operation, lock, stock, and barrel, and he bought all of Bob Overstreet's enormous collection. And so they invited me, and I became one of the advisors in 95. I've been an advisor ever since. Since I'm not a dealer, what I do is I talk about the market and what I found, or books that I bought, and my reasoning why I would buy them, and my enthusiasm for them. And the other thing that happened at the same time was Mr. Geppi wanted to have a magazine dedicated to comic books to help. He runs Diamond Distributing, and back then it was enormously huge. And so with that in mind, I became one of the feature writers for the comic book marketplace for a few years. And what I ended up doing is I would highlight Golden Age books and Silver Age books that I liked, and I would write articles about them. Many of the things that I wrote about, and then I would provide the pictures of the books from a laser scanner, down to some print shop where they laser them off, and I'd send them in. And what have you, there was a very, very small stipend. It was, I don't think that Mr. Jeppy ever made a dime on Comic Book Marketplace, Comic Book Monthly, Comic Book Quarterly, all of which I participated with and also gave information to. So I wrote for comics, and then and I have continued to be part of the team on Overstreet. I think that the Overstreet Price Guide is a very useful tool to know which books are what. Pricing is somewhat problematic because if you, for example, the San Diego Comic Convention is coming up momentarily, and the comic book price guide will be distributed at the each year. That's where they distribute the Overstreet price guide. All the information that goes into that book is a year old, and then finally the book then comes out. Whenever you have, because of our technology that we have now, there's no way that a printed price guide can be accurate, because the moment that is printed, all of the information that's there is old, and it was old, even it was a year's worth of information that was going to be put into it anyway. So a lot of it is 2 years old. But the features that the guys write about and the trends that they find in the market, which I talk about too, is very, very helpful, and to hear other voices as far as what the advisors have to say. Some of it's a little bit self-serving for some of the guys. I just can't keep those mid-grade Dell comics in stock. They just sell. They just blow out no, they don't. No, they don't. So, but that's basically what I've done. And here, when COVID started, my career, I mean, you're sort of in a wasteland. I mean, you have friends that you could talk to and stuff, but the social media where I could get together with other like-minded people like you, TM, get together to talk about comics and enjoy it from wherever we are in the world, literally, and as a place to talk with other fellow collectors. It reminds me like when I was a kid, that you'd go over to a friend's house who collected comics. You'd bring your books over. He'd show you his books. You show him your books, and you talk about them. You vibe on it. You talk about the stories. And now we do this virtually. And it's a wonderful thing that no matter where you are in the world, England, Australia, Canada, America, Mexico, Japan, all these different, South Africa, all over the world, Norway, Denmark, Holland. You talk with people all over the world that share the love of comics. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that's great, man. Like I did not know that you were this involved in comics. Like I know that you have a vast collection of comics and that, but I did not know that you were this involved in Overstreet and Quarterly Monthly and that. How was it working for those people? Was it fun? Was it interesting?
Well, it was, yes, it was fun because I basically had, where now I can go online and talk about it. Back then, this magazine was one of the only mechanisms that people had to get the word out. And this was prior to books even being slabs. Books weren't being graded and slabbed until the year 2000. So all of this stuff that was going on, and the internet and all the other things that were going on, the print media was a very successful way to get the word out. And so a lot of the information that I had gleaned over the years, I was able to share it with comic collectors and basically shine light, and not hide the information under a basket and keep it to myself. Some guys like to do that. I don't. I like to shine light, and so that the market can share and enjoy. And that's my motivation. And now, when I met Alan Pollitt at Comic Collector Geek, Alan asked me to come on and to talk about books with him. And that started about 3 years ago. 3 years and change or whatever. And then his channel then opened up another venue for us to then talk about books in a live fashion, and also, like we are talking here today, to talk about the things that we like about them and what we've observed and enjoyed. It is so different and so wonderful now to be able to do that, to share the love of the hobby. And especially right now, I talked about it on the recent show with Alan on Friday, yesterday, because we're filming now. But the thing was that the my childhood joy of Superman has rekindled because of this movie, and I haven't seen it yet, but because it's a hit and it's well received and it's done properly and affectionately, that it just, I was able to look through my 7 year old eyes as a 7 year old and fell in love with Superman again. I wrote an article on on my Instagram, which is Collecto6, on the first appearance of the supervillains in Superman 147 or whatever it was. And I had remembered that because I collected the Legion from 1960 when we moved to our house, and I loved the Legion. There it was. And as I was trying to figure a book to review, I reviewed it, and I was such affection because I remembered the Legion story, but I didn't remember that there was a Crypto story to begin it, where he fights Metallo. And I'm going, and this is 1962, I think the book 61, 62, anyway, 10 Center, 61. And so what I ended up doing, as I'm writing my article, and I have 20 pages that I can post, so I could post the entire Crypto story and the entire supervillain story. And here I am talking about crypto, and I'm flexing with a crypto story. And I said, what are the odds that I've flexed with some pretty big books, but I've never flexed with a crypto story, and now I can flex with crypto and Superman. So it just reopened it, and it rekindled my affection for Superman because he had taken so many hits over the years for the movies and the way the books were being written and all these other things. And it wasn't positive, it was negative. And now we have a very positive, wonderful thing, and it reopened my eyes to my affection for Superman. I have quite a bit of Superman in my collection. I didn't get rid of any of the ones that since '88 that I managed to put together. I was putting together Golden Age, particularly Alex Schomburg, and particularly the World War II books. But then that led to all manner of other things. But a lot of it had to do with Mr. Schomburg, and then attended things with Good Girl, not so much horror, but Good Girl and the Supers, and various the characters and the artists, learning who the artists were, and as they were as people, when they were there, when the different eras of their art as it progressed. And it's just, the history of it is so wonderful because you can revisit it. And if one last thing on this is that when you have a story, for example, a comic book that came out in World War II, and it has a patriotic cover or a propaganda cover, and let's say that you're a little kid lying on your living room floor listening to the radio, Little Orphan Annie, The Shadow, whoever you're listening to, Dick Tracy, and then Superman. And then what comes on, but they talk about the Battle of the Bulge, or they talk about the Normandy invasion, or they talk about Pearl Harbor being bombed, or the atomic bomb being dropped, or the end of the war, and your family that was going there. So when you go to a movie, you suspend your disbelief to watch the movie. When you read one of these Golden Age books, I try to suspend my modern thought and put myself into the environment and culture for when those books came out. So this book, I'm reading this book, and this is what's going on in the world. It's a very, very rich, interesting thing to put yourself in that position.
So you mentioned a few times you writing, like you writing reviews, you writing for the Overstreet and that. But you've actually written a book. You've written a book on for tribute to your father, if I'm not wrong.
No, it's the
And that
grand.
could,
It's my grandfather.
okay,
I wrote the book back in 2013, I think. Let's see here. No, 2011. I lost my father. Dad passed away in 2013. My grandfather, my father was too young to serve in World War II. And so what he did instead, because we live in Portland, Oregon, we have a Kaiser Steel had a big plant here. right on Swan Island, and we were one of the major industries to produce Liberty ships, which won the war for us, to be able to get the goods and everything else and men and material where they had to go. And that was the key to it. We were the arsenal of democracy. And as such, these Liberty ships made all the difference. And we were knocking, they were coming down the ways like crazy. So because my father was a very sharp man, he went to work in the shipyards, putting in electrical wiring systems inside these Liberty ships. And that's what my dad did during World War II. The Korean War, he had gone into Navy. He was an ROTC with Navy, but they didn't call him to go to Korea. He was ready to go and was in the reserve and everything else, but they didn't call him. My grandfather, on the other hand, went to World War One, and his experiences in the war were that what started it was my mother found an article in Parade magazine saying that you could apply for the victory medals that a lot of the doughboys didn't pick up, and Grandpa never got his victory medal, which they issued from the government. So what I did was, it's very patriarchal. You have the first son gets to choose, I mean, gets to go to apply for it. The daughters don't. But dad was an only child. And I said, Dad, are you interested in doing this? No. And he signed a letter saying that I could do the research. And this started me on my trying to find out what Grandpa did in the war, because if you couldn't prove that your relation was in the war or what the person did in the war, they would not just arbitrarily issue a victory medal. And
Yeah.
this book is the story of me finding out about my grandfather in the war. And it was a labor of love. It's on Amazon, but I am not selling it. I haven't sold it for quite some time, because the service that I had that did that ceased to operate. The company that I printed my book with, First Books, basically isn't really doing it anymore. So the ones that are on Amazon are from the ones that did sell when I first got the book. And but I basically have been sending them to people that have an interest in history, my friends and what have you. And it's it was an amazing. It was I'm old enough to have known my grandfather. My grandfather died 1 year to the day that I graduated from college at the University of Oregon. June 13th, 1977, Grandpa died, and the same date of 76, I graduated from Oregon and went to work at the hotel. It was three generations, my dad, my grandfather, and I, all three of us, working at the family business. And Grandpa, over the years, told us my brother and I, very, very few stories about what happened in the war. And because anybody that has seen what he saw with World War One was the most. It was absolutely, as an ambulance driver, he saw the absolute worst that could happen to human beings on a daily basis. Plus, he was at risk of being killed the entire time he was up near the front. So there's a whole thing about that. But my writing is it isn't it's as clinical as it has to be to try to frame it, but I like to bring humor and observations to my writing. And a lot of my writing on my site, on my Instagram, Collecto6, is like miniatures of what I wrote for the comic book marketplace. I mean, I'll have a topic and sometimes I'll skewer it, sometimes I'll be affectionate, but I mean, if it's goofy, I'm gonna call it goofy, but it's all good. It's all good. It says this was so goofy, it was so cheesy. I loved the cheese. I loved the cheese. So, but that's how I approached it, and it's been a very beneficial thing, again, to have the social media so that one can express oneself with people that have like interest.
Now, do you ever, like, you wrote that book, you write reviews, you write like your thoughts on certain comics. Did you ever think of actually writing a comic book?
I helped participate with Boris the Bear. Jim Smith was a friend of mine, and as he was writing his book for Dark Horse, and then when he broke and went with made his own company, Nicotat Comics, I always hang out with Jim. And near the end of the run, or thereabouts, I would go over and I would I'm watching. I will listen to tell me what the plots were, and it was Jim's book, and it was his stories. But I would sort of add on I said, what about this? What about that? And every so often he would find value in what I said, but it was Jim's book, not mine. But I did enough of it that he actually gave me a couple of credits on the banner of Boris the Bear for a couple of them, and it was kind of fun to have that. He was just being very kind, but I had a couple of kind of running jokes because Boris was a very parody. He would have Bat Bear. I mean, he would do all these other things. If you've read Boris, Boris the Bear #1 was an extremely important book for Dark Horse Comics early on. He was one of the best-selling books they had for Dark Horse, along with Dark Horse Presents. And it was a very, very important function of that. So,
Now, you mentioned like that you're a very big history buff and that, while you're talking about your grandfather and father and stuff, you said that you had to go back and do history. You had to figure out what they did in the war, what their role was in the war. Do you think that growing up and knowing the history of your grandfather, knowing the history of your father, was what made you interested in history?
no, I had a teacher in high school who I always had a certain level of interest in history, particularly because of the era in which I grew up. When I grew up, World War II, Korea had just ended. Literally, when I was born, the war in Korea, the armistice was signed. And but everybody, my parents' friends, and a lot of the kids that I knew that I grew up with, a lot of their family were in World War II. A lot of their uncles, brothers, parents, everything else. And so World War II was very, very prevalent in the psyche and mindset. And so it was not, and television, when it wasn't a big thing, we had like two channels or something. I mean, television, there's no internet, there's no television, there's AM radio and the Beatles and Beach Boys, the music and the cool cars of the 60s, skateboards, baseball, tennis. These were the things that shaped me. I was very active in sports. I played football and tennis, and of course everybody skateboarded and what have you. But collecting comics and all the things is a very Americana cultural time from the from 59 up to all from 59. I was growing up from 59 into the 70s. So I was very, very blessed to grow up right in the middle of the silver age of comics, which was, and even at the time, I knew it was good. At the time, I knew comics were good because they were good. I didn't know about the golden age per se. A lot of those doors opened up for me later as I started to, as more and more information and the accessibility to information about it, the Gerber Photo Journal in particular, so that you could see what these covers looked like, where instead of having a printed list from a seller that you don't even know what the book looks like, unless you're a big hotshot or you live in a population center where they had comic stores. In Portland, they didn't. So it was that you basically that the sources of information from which to understand what it was how do you understand what you want if you can't even see it? And so all of this changed as I was growing up. All of that changed. The people that are for young men like yourself, you are blessed with as anything you want to find, any
Mhm.
images of them, who wrote them, who were the writers, where were they? Hell, where did they live? I mean, everything about them you have at your fingertips or on your phone. It was just, it's so, the amount of info, and that's why the price guide is so hard for them to be relevant price wise. Now, information wise, they're great. Content wise, they're great. They really are good. I love the Overstreet price guide. It is a handy reference. But the fact that pricing changes so quickly now, In a year, is Matt Baker selling? Is Alex Schomburg? Is something happened with Schomburg? Are Superman books selling better now because of the movie? Yes, they are. Is that all of these things that now you have the information and all of to make it advised for what you want to buy, or go online and find the book you want, push a button and it comes to your door. No, we never have any of that stuff. We didn't have nothing like that. It's changed all of that. I'm very, very aware of it. And I was, it's just that those sorts of things that are available now it makes it so much better to understand what it is. And once I began to understand my affection, one of the first term papers I ever did was on the Battle of Midway, which was when we basically ended the Japanese threat with their carriers, and we had broken their code and all the history that went with that. The crucible of the Second World War has affected me quite a bit because I grew up just post World War II. I say in the Golden Age, the Golden Age started in June of '38 with Action Comics #1. And then the bomb dropped in 1945. So from 38 to 45 is the Golden Age, Golden Age. Then from 45, when the bomb dropped, up to about 50, 51, is still Golden Age, but it's actually more so the Atomic Age. And so I am actually a product of the Atomic Age. I myself am pre-code because I was born in '53 and the code came in September of '53, and the code came out in September of '54. What a crummy birthday present, Travis. What a rotten
Mhm.
birthday present the code was. But it was what saved the industry, and it basically did two other things that was very good. Number one, it it made it that comics showed that good would triumph over evil. And because of the number of things that you couldn't talk about, and disrespectful things in horror, and making fun of women or as objects or things like that, what happened was the writers and the artists had to bring up their game so that they could still sell interesting comic books. So that's why you had continuing plot lines in the Silver Age. So you'd have and the other thing too, which is an absolutely crucial, was that there was an overarching editorial control. Stan Lee was at Marvel, and Julius Schwartz was after Wessinger was at DC Comics. And because of that, you had they controlled what the product was. It wasn't like independent as a hog on ice, some creator of a character who can't write for sour apples but can draw, or a writer who can't draw but can write. It's the combination of a good writer and good art, and being able to then have enough panels in a book to actually tell a story. And the Silver Age did that. The Golden Age went hither and yon, and they went left, right, and up and down and center. But with the Silver Age, you had a continuity situation. If you bought a Marvel book, you knew what you were going to get. You bought a DC book, you knew what you were going to get. And those things really worked because it was like the studio system of Hollywood in the '30s. If you went to an MGM movie, if you went to a Warner Brothers movie, or Paramount, or RKO, or any of these other of Selznick, MGM, if you went to any of those movie houses, you knew the quality that you were going to have with those movies. And comic books was the same thing. And then the movies, basically, the houses went away, and so now movies are very hit and miss. They don't have it, and they don't have contract players that would put out so many movies. And same thing with comic books. It was a monthly schedule or bi-monthly or quarterly schedule, and those books came out, and you could bank on it. And you go down to your newsstand to buy them, and you get the next issue of Adventure. You get your next JLA. You get your next Spider-Man. You get your next Thor. And the continuity of the characters and the quality of the writing and art is what defines the Silver Age.
And do you think that after the Silver Age, kind of comics kind of went a little downhill with continuity and storytelling?
Continuity continued, but the thing about it was that in the Bronze Age, what happened with me is I lost interest because I had studied the Silver Age as a kid. I mean, every story, I mean, I knew it by like the back of my hand. And what I found in the Bronze Age to a large degree was warmed over plots that were reserved to the public. If you were not, if you hadn't grown up in the 60s, it was all new to you in the Bronze Age. And they had newer characters. They came up with Wolverine, the Moon Knight, various things, a Swamp Thing. And but what brought me back in mostly was that when The Dark Knight Returns came with Frank Miller, when that came in, and also Neil Adams's interpretation of Batman, those things brought me back, and because it was something new, it was a new view and a whole different way to approach the Batman. And for as odd as when I looked at the beautiful refined lines, Murphy Anderson, Kurt Swan, Carmen Infantino, Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby, all these guys, Russ Heath, Don Heck, all these people that were artists. And then the to then have a thing like what Frank Miller put out, which is this lumpy, bumpy, misshapen kind of guy, and it worked. It just worked, and I was just stunned by how it moved me. And then, of course, when Neil reinvigorated the Batman back to who the Batman was with his fabulous art and good writing, his writers were very good. The A good comic is a good comic. It's a when you read a good. I read a lot of good comics growing up. It's different, but it's good. And that's the thing that brought me back. And then off and on through Marshall Rogers and all these, Batman and what have you. And then with that, then the question is, then if you have finite dollars, most of us do, there are certain things with nowadays it's more cover driven. And the term that my friend Mark Oldroyd of Suddenly Comics in England said, and I think it's a perfect metaphor, is that comic books now, for the most part, are sold by their covers because the books inside are so small and there are so few panels to tell a story that it really is what they call fractional art. For example, this book is both fractional art and a very interesting book. This is the book that was handed out to the people, the theater goers, on the first day that the Superman movie was available. Now, they have other versions of this. They'll have the same cover that doesn't have IMAX and exclusively in theaters. But what you have a book that is a lovely, lovely cover. And this one actually has a story. Whereas when you have a book like this, and the different artists, the wonderful cast of artists that we now have. This one is Shubina, who is in Ukraine. But this am I what is the story I'm buying here? I'm not really buying this story here.
Hmm.
I'm buying the cover art, the Shubina, the artist. I'm buying the artist's work as fractional art. And comic books have to a large degree fallen into or become morphed into this kind of thing. That's why trade paperbacks are so popular, because a trade will put together the whole story so you don't go 9 months trying to figure out some story. You buy the trade, and also less expensively, and you get to read the whole thing unless you read it online to begin with. So the avenues and the places available for these to read those things. But for me, so much anymore, I buy, I focus on, there is so much in the golden age. There are so many publishers and characters and books that I'd never seen before, never even heard of. And even when you look at the Gerber Photo Journal, which changed everything for people to be able to see these books, and what Gerber did when he did the photo journal is he sought the best pictures of the books he could find, and almost without exception, all of the books that are pictured in the Gerber Photo Journal are from the Mile High collection of comics. And so when you look at those are probably the exemplars. The Mile High comic collection was the Edgar Church collection, was the most important find of comics as a pedigree in history, because not only was it the most comprehensive and beautiful conditioned collection ever found, but it changed grading forever. The minute those books came onto the market, the the VFNMs that you had became fines, because truly mint books were now for sale. And I remember when they were selling, they says, "We want double guide for these books." And I said, "You're crazy. Why would I pay double guide for a book like, you know?" But the fact was that double guide for a Mile High book was the steal of the century, to be able to get these older books. And before there was the grading service where you would have a third party, the pedigree, because of its consistency, if it became like a grade system. Is what's the grade of the book? It's a Mile High. Well, you know it's a beautiful book. So you say, well, I bought a Mile High. It's Mile High quality. It became quantified as a descriptor of books prior to grading. And that's where pedigrees had the San Francisco collection, the Lamont Larson collection, any number of these collections that they found. But the Mile High collection was the one that really changed everything. And I, of course, had the opportunity. I lived through that whole thing, and as far as that how it went.
So you mentioned earlier about trading books and that, and I talked to some old collectors and that pick up or that been collecting from the 80s and stuff. And like in the 80s, that was like a big thing. Like it'd be like, hey, I want to trade this comic for that comic. Like that's the comic I want. I
Mm.
want to know what the feeling is trading comics, because you say you trade a lot of comics and you've actually done it recently. What's that feeling like? Do you feel like hesitant on giving away all these comics for just one comic?
Oh, it's pain and pleasure. Absolutely. Uh, it's definitely pain and pleasure. But the thing about it was, I never sold my books. This is something that I learned early on. Um, if you buy the best book that you can find and or afford, okay, then if you can, hold on, because appreciation is our friend. So if you have a nice book that you don't have to make any apologies for, and you hold on to it and the value of the book appreciates, that is a nice thing. Loving the book is important too. But for me, I'm somewhat more pragmatic about how, I mean, I have the books I love. If they go up, it's great. But there are books that I love that they them in and of themselves, like Schomburg. I love Schomburg, and those books are blue chips. The gold chip, the golden age tends to be the blue chips, other than the very high end keys that you get in silver and bronze. That's basically where the market is in my mind. At least that's where it is for me. And so what I did was, by holding on to these books, they appreciated in value. I had people trying to buy my books for years and years. And when I first started doing it, I did sell some. And then what happened, Travis, I found out rapidly that it's one thing to own a book, but to replace it, even in the 70s and in the 80s, in the 80s, was very difficult to do. And if I did replace the book, it was more expensive and a lower grade, because that's what I found. So I stopped selling. I just stopped. And so, fast forward now to where I am at my age, and also the books that have eluded me my entire life, that the books that I was careful about buying years ago served me in good stead. I always would say this, Travis. I said, if I could only figure a way to spend appreciation, it would be great. I paid $20, the book's worth 120. How do I get the 120? Well, I have to, how do I get that appreciation with, selling the book? But what I found was there is a way to spend appreciation, and that is by trading. And there are some very advanced guys, Doc for one, uh, um, uh, Man Cave Comics. I
Yes.
I watched what he did when he traded beautiful, amazing books that he had accumulated to get one big book. There are super grails that are in our, they call them grails. There are grail books all over, but the super grails are the ones that are the actual founding books of our hobby, of the whole collecting hobby. Action Comics 1, Superman number 1, Detective 27, Batman number 1, Captain America number 1, Marvel Comics 1, and Detective Comics 37, 31, Detective 31. Um, then you have like a half step down. They have the Silver Age books that are of way high, and the Golden Age books that are way high, the top 100 books, the top 50 books, whatever. But at the very top, the things that started, the ones, the inception of our books, there is the art that they have, and it's the characters that were created, and it all goes back to two characters. It goes back to Superman, who started it all, and all the newspaper reprints and all of trying to even format the book and all of that. It was Superman first, and it was Batman second, and then everything came out after that. Everybody emulated them because the marketplace, the comic book marketplace, that was just not for kids, was ready for fine characterization, good stories, interesting art, and accessible. And this is what changed the firmament. And I mean, the readership and the number of publishers and the number of characters, it is so vast, the golden age. It's just, and when the drumbeat against comics happened in the mid 50s, and the code came in 54, and then the comic book, the code authority, the stamps and stuff, all those publishers that were still running at that time, just the number of publishers went from like 2,500 down to 200. I mean, it was overnight. That entire model of how young adults, in other words, comics were not aimed necessarily at children. They were aimed at young adults. And that's why the stuff that was more adult in content, with crime and Good Girl and all this other stuff, if you're a little kid, what book do you want? Well, I want the naughty book. That's what I want. I want to see the girls. I want to see the guy getting the knife in the eye. I mean, stuff like that. That's what you want, because hell, good is good. Even as a kid, you know what good was. So the mothers rebelled against it, and then the drumbeat, and then politicians figured they could make points by basically carving up the comic industry, and they did. Kefauver, and that's what they did. And then the seduction of the innocent book, and all this other stuff that happened that brought us the code. But as I said, the code necessitated cleaner, better writing and consistency with the code. And the Silver Age, you want to talk about Marvel Mania. Then when the Marvel characters came in, and then, it's an amazing history that we have of how the comics actually became where they are now.
Now, you mentioned you love Golden Age, you love Silver Age, but you actually collect a lot of modern comics, and that you showed a few off that you pick up and stuff. Do you read them, or do you do what you said earlier and just cover by? You cover
I
by
cover
for.
by. I confess that I cover by. I have so many stories in my head, because there are recurring themes that have happened since the Golden Age. And if you're reading it now, but the thing is that some of the writers, in order to try to distinguish themselves, uh, will trade on apocalyptic things, end of the world and post-war, and then the dissolution of society, and and then the berserker rage and muscles and teeth and sweat and things like that. Whereas if you had a very well considered, well drawn story of Batman, as an illustration, like a Neil Adams story, like with the Ra's al Ghul set, with and Talia coming in and what have you. It's a beautiful story. It's well written and well drawn. House of Secrets 92, the Swamp Thing. When you read that story, it's not, he isn't pretty, but the story and the artwork are compelling. So when there are enough pages in the book, 36 pages, that you can actually tell a story. It isn't, two-thirds ads. It's wafer thin, and you can't. There's nothing that you can hold on to with the story unless you have it condensed or put together. Unless you can keep your interest in something for week after month after month after month after month after month. I'm too old of a bunny to do that. I find that there are so many Golden Age books that I have never seen or even heard of, that when my eyes are open to them from different collectors, and or dealers that say, "Hey, have you ever seen this?" I can go online and read the book, Comic Book Plus, or read comics, read all comics or whatever it is, and I can look inside the book and actually read it without having to crack the thing open and potentially damage the book. Or if I want to buy the book, I can see the art that's inside. It is so different from when I started growing up to how you can actually enjoy comics. You are very, very blessed with the way the market, your generation and the younger, even younger than you, that this is all available to you to see. And the fact that now we have a movie that has reinforced the fact that goodness of and relationships between, romance with a man and a woman, and heroism and good over evil, with great characterization, interesting graphics, and sufficient special effects to tell a story. It isn't an hour and a half of special effects. They've tried that. It doesn't work. There has to be a story that holds all of that together, have it be the enhancement. It's the steak is the story. The salt and pepper is the seasoning that makes it go. Um, Too much seasoning and it doesn't taste good. Not enough seasoning and it doesn't taste good. But you have that story and you can actually have that. So I tend to be focusing on Golden Age, and especially the Golden Age was superheroes running around in capes and what have you. And a lot of it was fighting the Nazis and the Japanese. When the war ended, what was left of the plots, what was left of the continuum in which these characters were. Now, DC weathered it better than Timely and others because Superman had the cast of characters with the Daily Planet and Jimmy and Lois Lane and Brainiac and Lex Luthor and all these other characters, much like Batman. Batman had a great rogues gallery. They had Gotham City, the Batmobile, Robin, all the other things that they had. They were able to go forward and still be accessible and interesting. But what also happened was this: new genres arrived after the young men came back from the war, who didn't want to see necessarily guys flying around in tights. What they wanted was pretty girls. They wanted crime. They wanted adventure. They wanted horror. They wanted science fiction. And so that all of those genres started in what I call the atomic age of the golden age. And I spend most of my time now in the atomic age because there are all these different genres that you can choose from without the restriction of the Comics Code Authority.
That's great. So we're going to wrap things up and that, but before we do, I want to say thank you so much, Steppo, for coming on and gracing me with your appearance and that, and telling me all of these great stories. Because I had a blast. For a while, I was like, oh no, I'm actually supposed to be talking, and that I was so enamored in you telling these stories and that, and I just absolutely loved it. But you do not have a YouTube channel, but you're
No, sir.
over on Comic Collector Geek. That's Alan's channel every Monday and Fridays.
Yes, sir.
So you guys can go look for Steppo over on Alan's channel. The link is down below. You can also go check out Steppo on IG, and I'll also drop the link to your book that you wrote, the Amazon link down below, so people can go check that out and pick it up if they please. Last question. I'm kind of curious though, why, like, because you're very prominent on YouTube, and that I'm kind of curious on why you don't have a YouTube channel yourself.
because and I'm on Bleeker's Church all the time too.
Yes.
Bleak is it's a lot of fun. It's a different group of people, and again, it's the group of people that we have, the Immortal Biggie Shack, and all the friends that we that have channels, and we can go visit them, and Lyle Hobson and Matt Atkinson and Nate and Hagen and Chonko and you and all these people that we get to share that. It's so rich. I
Yes.
find that if the way I look at it is this. Um, Alan opened my eyes to this, and I'm on Team Alan because I really do enjoy. We have a chemistry. We have we have virtually identical collecting interests, and we butt heads all the time. I mean, really, it is like Laurel and Hardy, and he's Laurel and I'm Hardy. But it's just this. It's the chemistry that we have and the fun we have with the books that I like to be able to not have the, I won't say the onus, but have the pressure of having to create content is, I think that would, for me personally, would make it more difficult for me to be as extemporaneous and open as I am, because I can then come visit and bring what I have, and then I kind of have a chance to recharge my batteries. I confess to you, Travis, that some my stories are the same stories. I remember other things as well, but when you've been collecting for 65 years, there's a lot of stuff, you know. And one last thing, when I would get these collections, how do you get these collections? The wasteland, the desert that I was on with nothing available for years at a time, there's nothing. And I go to conventions with money in my pocket and there'd be nothing to buy, you know, and sort of like that. And that's what kind of killed me on conventions, because it used to be you could go, but now because the sellers can sell anywhere without having to travel and have all the expenses and sell them more favorably, still make their money, and the seller, the buyer gets a better deal because they don't have to pay for their food and lodging and airfare and all the other stuff that, you know, and help if they have to have it. These are things that I have found, and I will say I'm set in my ways, but I think that the best way I like to share what I know with my friends in the hobby rather than have a central thing for myself.
That's great. That makes sense too, because like, yeah, I do feel that like the passion goes away when you're just like, oh, this feels like work now. I have to set up this channel. I have to set
Exactly.
up this and that. So I get what you mean, and it makes total sense and stuff. So you go into it, you're just like, nope, this is what I'm going to talk about. This is what I got today and stuff. This is what I'm going to show, and that's all you have to worry about. So I can respect that. I definitely can respect
Thank you. Thank you. And also being able to come on. This is the thing with you. I'm so happy to come be with you. And I mean, I've been on various other channels, Rob's Fat Stacks, and a lot of these other channels I've been on. But you know, it's just that we have a very nice group of friends that we turn in with Bleak and Biggie and all we have a really nice group of friends. And I have to say, especially my friends in Canada, like you, I've found that the Canadians are so into the comics and so polite and so much it's just I really love the Canadian culture. I love the Canadian guys, but they are, you know, hammer and tong to get books just like us. You know, you guys, you know a good thing when you see it, by God, and you go for it, and we share that, and I love that. That it transcends borders, it transcends language, it transcends nationalities. Comic books are the unifying factor. It's true.
it. It is so much. It is so true. So thank you so much, Steppo, for coming on here and that. I will also put Bleeker's link down below for Sunday Church, because that's a great time as well. You get to see nice books, get to talk with great people and that. So I'll definitely put the link down below for that.
Great.
But that is it for Chatting with the Comic Community, episode 91. Stephen, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Let
Trav.
like, comment, subscribe, and as always, my friends, stay freaking nerdy.